Hello everybody and welcome back. So in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is building a coronavirus web scraper / voice assistant. So the idea being we're going to collect all this data related to the coronavirus. So cases, deaths, cases by country, people tested, pretty much any data that we want. And then we're going to set up a voice assistant that can actually serve that data to us. So I can ask a question like, how many cases in Canada? How many worldwide cases, right? And it'll actually give us a response. And this is going to work using regex search patterns. So rather than using like some ML or AI model to set up the voice assistant, which we could do, we'll keep it simple. And this will allow us to really easily add some new patterns so that if you guys want to change or modify this program, you're really easily able to do that. And that's kind of the idea behind a lot of my tutorials is I want to teach you the basics. I want to teach you kind of all the skills and tools you need, and then you can customize the projects, mess around with it, and add your own stuff because you know how to do that. So let me just show you how this works. How many cases are there in Canada?
61,165.
How many worldwide cases are there? So that one didn't work, but how many total cases are there?
3,686,963.
So you get the idea. That's the basics of how that works. I actually need to close this because I forgot to quit that application. Okay, so we have subline here. But that's the idea, right? So you ask it questions and then it gives you the answers based on those questions. Now I'm actually going to be getting all of the data for this project from this website here. So this is just the first search result when you search coronavirus cases. I'll leave a link to everything that I show here in the description. But you get the idea. So we have coronavirus cases. This is the total cases. And then if we come down here, we get country specific data. So USA, Spain, and then all their related data. Notice that some of these blocks are missing because I guess they just aren't reported or something like that, or they're not in yet, but that's the idea behind this. So what we need to do is find a way to get the information from this website into our Python code. Now, usually this would actually be quite difficult. We would have to do this using like Beautiful Soup or Selenium or some kind of web scraper, and have to look for like IDs and tags and dig into the HTML. You know, I'm not a fan of doing that, and neither is ParseHub, which is why they actually sponsored this video, and we're going to be using them to do this web scraping. Now, I know people get really weary whenever you hear the word sponsor. This is free. This is completely free. I promise you this will save you a ton of time, and you do not need to pay for this, but we'll just be using this for the project. So they do have paid plans, but for our purpose and for a lot of purposes, you don't need to purchase this. So just go to the description. It's parsehub.com and click download ParseHub for free. When you do that, it'll bring you to a page that looks like this. And essentially what this ParseHub tool does, if any of you are questioning why you download it, is it allows you to pretty much look at the website in kind of this graphical user interface tool. So you actually see this website and just simply click on the data you want. So you just click, I want that number, I want this, I want that, I want anything that looks like this. And what it will do is it will scrape the website for you. It will give you an API that you can call to get that data, and will let you download the data in JSON format, in CSV format, and for free. So that's the idea behind ParseHub. But once you download it, again, parsehub.com, this will be in the description. They have sponsored this video. I'm being transparent with you guys. Open that up, and what we're going to do is actually make a new project. So this is what the tool looks like. I mean, you can go through it, look at the tutorials, documentation if you want. But all we need to do, I'll show you how to do this, is make a new project. Now this might open up a like tutorial for you that it tries to walk you through. You can exit out of that if possible. If you have to go through it, go through it. It's probably worthwhile to actually teach you how the tool works. But once you get out of that, go to new project. And what we're going to do is actually put in the URL for that coronavirus website that we want. So you can see it's already in here for me because I've used it a bunch of times already. But when you do that, so if you put in that URL for the coronavirus website, which is in the description, and click Start Project on this URL, you can see that we can actually look at the website on the right-hand side of our screen, and very shortly we'll be able to start selecting what elements we actually want to take from the website. So I'll select Start Project on this URL. Just give it a second. Sometimes this does lag a little bit. You got to remember it's scraping a ton of information, so that's likely why. And what we can do is just start clicking on stuff that we want. Now it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the idea is that on a page, right? So we have a page object. We can select different items from the page. And the first items that I want to select are related to the total coronavirus cases. So I want to get all of these values here. So how should we do that? Well, let's make a new selection here. And I'm going to call this selection total. So this will be like total cases, total deaths, like all of that. And what I'm going to do inside of total now is select H1 like that. And I'm going to select the other one here. So this deaths.
3,686,963.
And we can see that my, voice assistant is still running in the background because I didn't close it properly. So give me a second to close that. Okay, so my voice assistant was actually running in the background. I forgot to exit it. But anyways, what we're going to do is just select what we want from the selection. So in this case, I want the H1 tags. So coronavirus cases, deaths, and recovered. And notice when I selected this H1 tag, these two highlighted in yellow, which said these are very similar. Do you want to select these as well? We did, so I selected deaths. And then as soon as I selected deaths, it actually automatically selected recovered. Now, the reason for that is because this can actually do like pattern recognition. So as soon as you select a few items, it will automatically try to select all the other items that are related to those items, so that are similar. Now, that saves you a ton of time, and that's pretty useful. Now, what we're going to do is we want to actually get these number values as well, right? And I want to link those to this. So I want to link them to coronavirus cases so that if we look here in our data that's being generated, we can see we have total, we have a bunch of entries, and they each have a name. Now I want to make sure that these entries that have the name coronavirus cases have the correct value, right? So what I do is I go to total, I click this little plus button on the side here, and I hit relative select. So when I do that, I can click on one of the items I've already selected, which is this case, right, or this coronavirus cases, and then it'll bring a little arrow, and I can select the item that I want to relate to it, which in this case is this value. So I'll select that. And now we can see it's a selection 1, and it shows me the value. So if I want to change that name, I go up here and I change it. So I'll say instead of selection 1, we'll call that value. So now we have the name that corresponds to the value. And what I'll do next is I'll select deaths. I'll select its value. And again, notice it automatically does that for recovered. So as soon as you do 2 selections, it will automatically try to pattern match. And if there's something that you don't like, you can unselect it, or you can select other things if it missed it. So that's how that works. So notice now we have this JSON format down here, and that's the data that we'll be able to access afterwards. That's what it looks like, and this just generates it for you as you go. So I think you can probably appreciate why I'm using this tool, because for a mass amount of data like this is way easier, and I think this is a pretty useful tool. It's pretty cool, and it's free, so we can use it. So let's now hit a new selection on the page. So we have this total section, right? So total is right here, but I want to make a new section inside of this kind of JSON. So what I'm going to do is go on page, I'm going to do new select, and I'm going to select now the name USA. So I'll select USA. There we go. And now I'll select Spain. So yes, I'll do a check mark on that. And we should see that it selects almost all the countries. It misses a few though. So since it missed some, I'll select UK. And then when I do that, it notices, oh, you want all of them, and it selects all of them. Now, if you want to see how many items you selected, you can see that over here. It says like 212. And what I'm going to do inside of this select is put what I selected. So in this case, I selected country. So we have total and we have country. Now you can see where it says extract. That is like taking the value from there. So you can see we're taking the name. So if I go, it has a name and then it has a URL. Now I don't want the URL, so I'm going to delete it just by hitting that trash button like that. And you can see it's pretty intuitive on how this works. So what I'll do now is I want to link the names that I've selected with their cases. So we'll use the relative select tool. I'll click plus, relative select. I'll select the name, and then I'll select the data I want, which in this case is total cases. Now I do need to name this, so let's name this total underscore cases like that. And now if we look here and we scroll down, it's only doing it for USA. Yeah, because I need to select one more. So we can see that for USA, it shows the total cases. Now for Spain, what I'll do is I'll select, again, the cases here. The pattern matching will happen, and we'll notice it selects all of them, except it forgets a few. So let's link that up. When we link that up, now give it a second, and all of them are selected. So if we scroll down, we can see that it's showing us pretty much all of the total cases, and it says 207 more, which we will get when we actually retrieve this data. So let's do one more selection. I want to actually add another relative select inside of here. So we'll select USA, and now we'll select the total deaths, because all I really care about for my project is the cases and deaths, but for you guys, feel free to select as many values as you want. So let's keep going. And keep going. Okay, so that should already be selected. Nice. So now let's do UK and give it a second, and we can see it selects pretty much all of them. Now notice there's a few gaps here, so you'll see that this number might be a little bit smaller than some of the other values. That's just because some countries don't actually have values for that. And then I'm going to call this total deaths, like that. Okay, so let's review our JSON. We can see we have the name, total cases, total deaths. Looks good to me. So what I'm going to say is, all right, I'm done. Let's click get data. Now what get data does is gives us a little interface so that we can actually now run kind of the program we just created and scrape that website. So let's click run. When you click run, what's going to happen is it's actually just going to scrape the website, right? So if we wanted to update the data that we had, we would have to run this again. And I'll show you ways that we can do that from the Python code so that we don't actually have to go back into this tool. This is just the first time we want to do this. We do it in the tool. So we set up what's called a run, and then we can rerun that. We can run another run. That's kind of the way it works. We have projects and then we have runs. And each run is like running your project and updating the data. And you can access each of those runs, which means like say every morning you wanted to run this and you wanted to track, the increase in cases and all of that. I mean, this already does it for you, but you could do that. And you can access all of the runs that you've done in the past. So there we go. We can see our data is ready. This does take a few seconds because this actually runs on their servers. It doesn't run locally, which means that you're not using any of your system resources to do this web scraping. You're using their servers, and that's why they have some paid plans. So if you're like an enterprise or something and you're doing this, then you can just use their servers to do it, and obviously they need to charge for that. So here we have that we can download our data in a CSV and Excel format. We can download it in JSON, or we can use the API. Now we're actually going to use the API to do this, which means we're going to send a web request to this API, and it will actually give us the data back. Now you could download the data if you want. That's an option, of course, as well. But it's just better probably to use this API for our purpose. So since we're going to use this API, we need the details from this run. So we need the API key, we need the project token, and we need the run token. So let's grab those values and make sure we leave this open. And let's go into a Python file. So I'm going to open one up here, and let's start inserting those as variables. So let's say API_key is equal to, and then we'll copy the API key, which is right here. Let's go project_token. This is probably the most important one. I actually don't know if we need the run token, and we'll access that. And then run_token equals, and then we'll steal that run token. All right, so there we go. We have the data from this that we need. Now I'll show you the URLs and how we actually access this from like the Parsing API, but that's all we need from this. So we can actually close that project now. All right, now what we're gonna do, the first thing we actually need to do is we need to install something in pip. So for this project, we're gonna use a module called requests. So import, oops, not in all capitals, import requests, like that. Now request is a third-party module. To install it, you do pip install request. Now this is using something called the package installer for Python. I don't know the formal name, but that's pretty much what it is. So if you have Python on your system, it automatically comes with pip. Although when you run this command, you're going to get one or two results. You're going to get that it's installing, it already installed, and like this worked, or you're going to get something that says pip is not a recognized command. Now, if you're on Mac or Linux or Ubuntu or whatever OS you're on, try pip 3. So if you're not on Windows, try pip 3 and then install requests. If you are on Windows, you're going to try pip. And if those don't work for you, then you have your pip kind of misconfigured. It's not on your system path. So I'm going to leave a link to a video and a card in the top right, which I guess for you is going to be that. And from there, it'll show you how to fix pip. So I know the video doesn't say like how to fix pip. It says how to install Pygame, but it will show you how to reconfigure your pip so that that's working properly. So follow that video and then again, try to install the request module, and we'll have a few other modules we need to install later on. Okay, so once you install requests, now what we're actually going to do, and I got to open up my other window here, so because I don't remember these URLs off by heart. So let me go coronavirus. Let's open that. What we're going to do is actually call a GET request on the API from Parsing. Now I need to copy in this URL because I can't remember it off the top of my head. And then let's get it. So let me move this over here. All right, so the request that we're looking for is something like this. So let me just copy this in and then I'll show you how this works. Okay, so let's go like that. Oops, what the heck? Why is my copy and paste not working today? Let's go here, copy. All right, and paste. Okay, sweet. So let me zoom out. So this is the URL that we need to use to access our information, like to get the data from that run that we just did. And it's going to return that to us in a JSON format. But the idea is that we have this, which I'll leave in the description again, https www.parsub.com/API v2 projects / the project token, which we have here is actually the project token. So we'll put that in. So oops, what the heck is happening here? So project token like that. And then the params is equal to self.params. But what I'm actually going to put here, because I just stole that from another piece, is API underscore key. I think that's what it is. API key. Yeah. Colon API key. So this is kind of like the authentication for this GET request. We need to give our API key and then the project token. And what we're saying is let's get the last ready run. So the last run that we did that is ready, and let's get the data from that. So we're saying the response is equal to request.get. And then I'll show you that I can actually print this out once I format it, and we'll get all the data. So if I import the module JSON, which is built into Python, you shouldn't need to install it. Then what I can say is data equals JSON dot, I believe it's loads, response. And I think I can say response dot data. What am I saying? Request response dot, and I believe it's data like that. So this should hopefully work. Again, this will be in the description if you guys need to use this. I'll link the code somewhere there as well so you can copy this. But this is the URL. I'm using an F string. I put the project token here, params API key equals API key for the authentication. And now if I print out data and I run this, let's see, I get an error. What's the issue? Object has no attribute data. So I think I can actually just leave it like response.text. That should work. Yeah, okay, so this needs to be response.text, not data. But now if you see, it gives me all of this data, and we have, China, total cases, 82,000, deaths, 4,000, whatever. And we have the total information for coronavirus cases, value is that, right? And that's the idea. So we can do something like that. So now that we have this data, all we need to do is kind of make some interface that's going to let us access this data nicely. So what we're going to do for that is actually set up a class, which we'll get started with now. All right, so I just took a break there to grab a Halls because my throat is killing. So if you hear that, that's why I have a Halls in my mouth right now. But what we're going to do now is set up a class that's actually going to let us kind of parse through this data and look at it nicely. Because right now, right, if I go data, I can go like total. What did I even call this? Did I call this total cases? I guess we'll have to look at this again because now I forget. So let me print this out. Print. So we print this. We can see that we have the keys of total. Okay, so that's the first one. And then I think the other key that we had was country. Okay, so let's look at data total. So data total gives us now just the information related to total. And if we look at data of country like that, then it gives us all of the country related data. So essentially we need a way so that we can find like all of the data related to USA or Italy really easily without having to like go check every single time. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up a class, and I'm going to call this class data. Now inside of here, we're going to define the init method, and we're going to take a self. We're going to take a API key, and we're going to take a project token like that. Okay. So now that we have that, we'll say self.API key equals API key, and we'll say self.project token equals project token. Now I'm also going to set up self.params. Now this is going to be the authentication. So this is what we have to pass with every request to say, yes, this is me, I have access to this. So we're going to say API key colon, and I don't even think I need to do quotation marks. So maybe I do. Let's do, yeah, I think I do. API key is self.API key. All right. So there we go. So self.params API key is self.API key. So now we have that information. What I'm going to do is actually set up a method called get updated data or get data. So what get data is actually going to do is it's going to call this request and set the data attribute for this object. So we're going to say self in here, and then we're just going to copy what we have here and put it here. So this will say response equals that. And then where'd the rest of my stuff go? Okay, so I guess it just didn't copy that other line. That's great. So we'll say self.data equals json.loads response.txt. Okay, so essentially the reason I'm doing this in here is I want to make it so that I can call this method at any point and update the data that we have. Because notice it's this last ready run. That means it gets the most recent run for this project, because what I can do, right, is I can go back to ParseHub and I can run this again if I want to. So I can open up that project. So let's go, I guess it's gonna be this one, the most recent one. And I can click get data and I can do another run. So what I want to do is make sure that this method that I have here is giving me the most recent run. So what I'll do then is I'll call self.getData. And now what I've done is I'm pretty much setting up this data variable. And that's pretty much how that works, right? So we'll get the data. And yeah, there we go. So we have this set up, and now we've done the exact same thing that we did before. If I wanted to instantialize this, then I would say something like data equals data. And here I would have to pass the API key and the project token. So I guess I could just put API key, project token. And what I can do is even just print, data.data, as weird as that is. And this should give us the same result. And it does. So we've set up that class, and now that works. So what I want to do is set up a few methods in here that give us specific data. So the first method that I want to do is set up one that gives us the total cases. So actually define get underscore total underscore cases. Let's put a self inside here. And then what we'll do is we're just going to return self.data. We'll put inside of here, I guess, total. And then we need to figure out what that total cases was. So I think that the key for that was the name equals coronavirus cases. Okay, so we need to find an entry that has the name of coronavirus cases. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to have self.getData total. And we'll actually have to modify this a bit. So we'll say, actually, I'm just going to say data equals self.data total. And we'll say for content in data, we'll say if content name equals, oops, not that. I wanted coronavirus cases. I don't know why my control C is not working here. Then we'll paste that there. So coronavirus cases. And we'll go here, and what we'll do then in this case is return content. So if the content, when we're looping through data, if the name is equal to coronavirus cases, then we can return content value. Now, the logic behind this is that we will get this list, right? So this list up to here when we index at total. Then what we'll do is we'll loop through all of these. We'll see if one of them has the name equal to coronavirus cases. And if it does, we'll simply return the value of that kind of like content of that little dictionary. So in that case, that will give us the value. So we can do a very similar thing here. Instead of get total cases, now we'll do get total deaths. And okay, I keep forgetting that I've like messed up my copy and paste key here somehow. So let's just use the built-in. So get total cases. Let's do get total deaths. And then here, instead of coronavirus cases, I believe this just said deaths. So we can check if we go here and look at this data, it does just say deaths colon. So that will now give us the total deaths. And if we wanted recovered, we could set that up as well, except I'm just going to leave it at this for now. Okay, so now we have get total cases and get total deaths. Let's test this. So data.get total cases. Let's run that and let's see. We get the value 3.687 million. Nice. And now let's do deaths. Okay, and 255,138. So pretty straightforward. This is pretty easy to do. Now all we need to do is get the information related to countries. So let's do that. Let's get define get country. Do we want get country data? Yeah, let's just say get country data. And what this will do is just return all of the data for that country. So we'll say get country data. We'll put self. We'll put the country here. It's going to be a very similar thing to what we've done here, except with countries. So we'll say data equals self.data. And I understand I might be confusing you by using too many datas here. Self.data. Inside of here, we need country, because I believe that's what I called it. So country like that. And we'll say for content in data, if content name dot lower, this is important, make sure it's dot lower, is equal to country dot lower. We'll make sure that it doesn't matter about the capitalization. Then what we'll do is we'll return the content like that. So there we go. And I guess we can make it here. If there's nothing for what we're asking, we'll just return like blank, I guess, like we return 0. And then in this case, we can return 0 as well. Now I'm doing it as a string just because we're going to be like saying it from the voice assistant, but you could return an int value if you wanted. Just note that these values by default are strings. So like all of the value inside of content is a string. So if you want to convert that, you'll need to convert that to an integer. All right, so let's try to get the country data for something. So let's say get country data. Let's try Canada, where I live, run. And there we go, name Canada, total cases, total deaths. So now if I got that and I wanted to access just the total cases, I would say total underscore, cases like that. And there we go, we get 61,000. And that's the idea behind this and how that works. Okay, so pretty much, I mean, this is kind of the only thing we really need for getting the data, right? So we've set up that class, and now that we've done that, we can start using the voice assistant and accessing data from it like this. So that's the idea. We just want to set up a little interface so that it's really easy to grab data. And of course, you can make this more robust, more complex. I'm just doing it quickly because, again, the idea is not to go overboard, just to show you what you need to know, and then you can customize from there. All right, so let's leave that. We'll add some stuff later. We'll look to find data, and now we need to set up the voice assistant. Now, setting up the voice assistant is kind of a pain. There's actually quite a few things we need to install, so I'm just going to open them up to make sure I don't forget to show you anything. But I do have a video tutorial on my channel showing this, but I do have a requirements.py file here. I'll try to link this in the description. Remind me if I forget. But we need to install all of these modules. So make sure you have your pip working, and we're just going to go through one by one. I know the ones that, like the order, so we're just going to say pip install. The first thing we're going to install is actually called PyWin32. Now, you might not have this module, this might not work, but if you're on Windows, you're going to need this. So pip install PyWin32. I already have that, but let's install that. So PyWin32. And then we're going to install speech recognition and PyTTSX3, I think, which is text to speech. So let's do speech recognition. So pip install speech recognition. Recognition, I think I spelled that right. There we go. It says already satisfied. Notice these capitals are important. So it's speech recognition. And again, I'll put this file in the description. Let's pip install PyTTSX3. I think that's right. Yes, it looks like it. Let's install. We can see that I already have that satisfied, but again, we're going to need that. And then the last one that we need to install is actually called PyAudio. Now, you probably won't be able to do it by just doing this. So the default install is pip install PyAudio. But when you do that, chances are you're going to run into a bug, or at least I did a bunch of times. So what we actually need to do to install PyAudio is go to a link that I'm going to leave in the description. It's here. So it's Python extension packages for Windows. And this is specifically for Windows, but because this wasn't working on Windows, I had to do this. We have to go to PyAudio, which is right here, and find the version that corresponds to our version of Python. So if I go and I type Python, you can see that I have Python version 3.8.2. So what I need to do is find the PyAudio version, and sorry, notice it's 64-bit as well. Find the PyAudio version that's AMD 64, and that's Python 3.8. Now, if you guys are on 3.7, you're going to do CP3.7, right? And then whatever, 32 or 64-bit. And if you're looking to determine what version of your Python, go into your command prompt or your terminal window and type Python, and then just look. It'll show you here. But I think you can also do something like Python -- version. I think that shows you. Yeah, so Python -- version, but you won't get the 64 or 32-bit, so you might just want to type Python and see what that is. So anyways, once we get here, again, link in the description, download the appropriate file. So I'm going to download this one, and just keep track of where it downloads because you're going to need to know that. So I'll download that to downloads. You notice it was already there. And what we'll do now is I'll show you a little shortcut to actually be able to install this from your command prompt. So if you're on Windows, go to wherever you installed that. So in this case, downloads. In this little top bar up here, where it usually would type in like the URL, I don't want to say URL, the path to what you're looking at, type CMD. It'll open up a command prompt window, and notice that here, where your directory is, will be inside of the directory that you did that. So if I went to like my raw video recordings and I did CMD, it would open it in raw video recordings. So that's cool, and it's just a little trick so that you don't have to like go CD downloads and change directory manually. Anyways, what we're going to do now is do pip install, and then this is going to be Pi Audio. So I'll just type P and tab to Pi Audio like that. So we're going to just install that wheel file. This is a pip wheel file. This is pretty much the same thing as when you install Pi Audio. It just will grab it from the internet. So hit enter with that wheel file, and then it should install that for you. So that's pretty much how you do this. This, again, there's many ways this could go wrong. Leave a comment if you're having issues, but the idea being that you want to download from this site the correct version and then install it like that. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to actually start working on the voice assistant. Now, that's going to involve a few imports. So the first import is we're going to say import pi ttsx. Is it 3? I think that's right. I'm just going to open my other file to make sure that I'm not misguiding us here. So let's get this open. So yeah, pi ttsx 3. So that's pi text to speech version 3, I guess. And we're going to import speech recognition, which is actually speech underscore recognition, as SR. Now that we have that, the only other, we'll do it as SR. We're going to import RE, which stands for, what is that? Regex. So regex search patterns. And we should have pretty much all the imports we need for right now. So let's go down here and let's start setting up a way that we can actually have the computer speak to us. Now this is pretty easy. We're just going to define speak with text, and then what we're going to say is engine equals, and I'm just looking at my other screen because I'm not going to memorize all the syntax. Pi ttsx3.init, so initialize the engine, and then what we're going to do is say engine dot say text, and then engine dot, I think it's say and wait, run and wait is what it is, run and wait. All right, so what we're saying is this function right here takes some text. We initialize the pi ttsx3 engine, which is pi text to speech. Then we say, and we wait for this to run until we exit. So let's actually test this. Let's go speak. Hello. Now remember that you're going to have your speakers set properly. So if you go to audio here, I'm on Windows. It's going to be different for Mac. Change your audio settings to be what you want them to be. So it comes out of the correct things. You see mine's linked to my monitor, which links to an external speaker, but that's important because, don't yell at me that it didn't work when your speakers aren't configured. So let's run this and see if it says hello.
Hello.
There we go. So I hope you guys heard that, but it did say hello. What is this thing still popping up on the left side here? I can't get rid of this. Okay, anyways, no, we'll just have to leave it for now. Okay, so speak, hello, there we go, said hello, that's working. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is define a function that can actually take our audio. So we need to be able to speak, and we need to be able to, so it needs to be able to speak, and it needs to be able to listen to us. So this is, a lot of people have issues with this. Again, make sure your microphone is set up correctly, and make sure it's not being used by another process. So in this case, I'm actually fortunate that my OBS doesn't mess with this mic, because I'm using the same mic for OBS as I am to speak into this thing. But if your mic is being used by another process, you might have an issue doing this. So just keep that in mind while you go through this tutorial. So let's define get underscore audio like that. We won't take any parameters. We're going to say r equals sr dot, in this case, recognizer. Now, recognizer is just the speech recognizer. I believe you can actually change languages and stuff with this, although I haven't looked into it that much. Then we're going to say with sr dot microphone. So like that as the source, we're using a context manager. We're going to say audio equals r dot listen, and then inside of here, we're going to put the source. Again, I don't have this memorized, so I just have to look on my other screen, and then we'll go through it after. Okay, so we're saying audio equals r dot listen source. So, listen on the source for some audio. As soon as it starts hearing something, it will start recording that, and we'll store that inside the sed variable here. So what we're going to say is try, because this does sometimes mess up, so we need to put in a try catch, r.recognize Google. So these are the different ways that these are the different things you can use. So you can use different engines. So like r dot, you can use Bing, Google, Houndify, IBM, Sphinx, whatever, Google Cloud. These are like the different assistants I think you can pick. I'm going to pick Google just because I've used that and it works. And inside of here, I'm going to put audio as the listening source. So it's going to recognize pretty much like it'll record, it'll save that recording like in memory, send that to this recognizer. This recognizer will actually listen to that and then tell us in a text format what was said. Now, this is pretty good. Like this hardly messes up, but it does make mistakes sometimes. So just keep that in mind. All right. So now we're going to say except exception as E, and then we'll just print exception colon E. And I think I need to put that in a string, so we will, like that. Okay, so there we go. So that is pretty much it. Now we'll return sed.lower, and notice that if this messes up, it will just return a blank string. So that's the idea behind this, that we're going to set up the recognizer, set up the microphone, listen on a source. This will actually record the audio, and then as soon as that's done, so it's stopped listening, it will pass that to the Google recognizer, which will then translate that into some text. If that works properly, we'll return sed.lower, and now we can get some audio. So let's actually print out the get audio and see what this does. Hello. And there you go, right? So it says hello. So we can speak into the microphone and we'll get audio. And now all we need to do is pretty much set up a loop, set up some speech patterns, and then, speak back, listen, which is, easier said than done, but still it's not that hard. So let's define a main function. We don't have to put this in a function, but I like to just so I can call it from other modules if I wanted to. And let's set up a while true loop. And in here, what we're going to do is just we're going to print listening. And then we're going to say text equals get audio. So essentially what we're going to do is every loop, we're going to listen. As soon as they start saying something, we'll record, we'll get their audio, and then we'll loop and look at their audio and see if we want to respond to that in some way. Now there is some variables that I need to set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is print started, just so we know, because sometimes this takes a second to get started. So we'll say started program like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say the end underscore phrase equals, and this is just how we end this loop. I'm just going to name it stop. So essentially if stop is inside of anything we say, so if we hear stop at all, we'll just stop the loop. So to do that, I'm going to say if text dot, find end phrase. So if it finds stop anywhere in there, then what we will do is we will break that loop like that. So that's how we quit. So we can add a little comment. We can say stop loop there, or something like that. Okay, so now that we have that, what I'm going to do is actually set up something on data that I needed to do. So there's actually something that I want to get, which is a list of all of the countries. Now the reason for that is I want to see if the person says any country in their text. And if they do, then I know that I'm going to be looking for country specific data. But the only way for me to know if they've said a valid country is to have a list of all of the countries. So inside of my data class, I'm going to set up a new method. I'm going to call this define get list of countries like that. Now in here we'll put self, and what we'll do is just loop through all of the names of the countries and return them. So we'll say, countries equals that. We could do this in one line, but I just want to, spread it out so it makes sense to everyone. And we'll say for country in self.data, and I guess if we put here country, then what we'll do is we'll say countries dot append, so add to the end the country name like that. So this should give us a list of countries. In fact, we might actually want to make this a set. We'll see. You know what? We'll do list of countries for now, and then we can put it into a set later. So then we'll return countries like that. And in fact, let's test that out. So we haven't even called any of these functions, so they won't run. So let's call data dot get list of countries, and let's print out this value and see if that works. So print. Okay, and you can see that here we go, we get a list of countries. And now what I'll actually do is I'll make these dot lower. So dot lower like that. And now these are automatically all lowercase, and we can see we have USA, Spain, Italy, UK, and they actually are organized by most amount of cases. So we could use that as well if we wanted to. But yeah, that's how we get that. Okay, so now that we have that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start setting up a few search patterns. So search patterns are pretty much what we're looking for in a text, like what question we're looking at. So I'm gonna say total underscore patterns like this is equal to a dictionary. And I'm gonna start defining regex search patterns. And I'll talk a little bit about how regex works, that I wanna look for in their text. So essentially, like, we kind of need to come up with some phrases that we're going to try to detect. So in my case before, I'm just looking at my other screen, I had something like, if the word total and the word cases was in their text, then we would return to them or speak back the total cases. So to do something like that, we say r.compile, and again, not R, stands for regex, and inside of here, we put a regex search pattern. Now, I'm not going to go through what regex is and how it works. It's pretty easy, but it does take a little bit of practice to get used to. But the patterns that I'm going to show you are pretty much all you'll really need to use, unless you want to make this like way more complex. But I will say that I'm not a master or pro at this, so there's probably a better pattern to use than what I'm using. But what we're going to do is we're going to say /w/s plus total. We're going to copy this. I'll talk about what this does in a second. And then cases. And I keep forgetting my damn copy and paste doesn't work, so I have to use this. I set like a keybind that messed it up. Okay, so there we go. So something, total, cases, and we're going to map that to something. Now, the idea here is that I want to make a dictionary that has patterns that map to a function. Now, the function is going to be what value I want to speak out. So what I want to return, what I want to say. The reason for this is going to make it really easy to loop through all the patterns, check if any of the patterns match our text, and if they do, just call the function we defined that matches that pattern, right? And return that and speak that. So in here, instead of like calling a function, I'm just going to put the function I would call, which in this case is data dot, and I guess this is get total cases. So I forgot to say what this regex pattern is. This w slash plus, what this says is any number of words. So we're going to look for any number of words, then total, then any number of words, then cases. That's what that means. Now, I believe there has to be at least one, but the idea being like if you said how many total number of cases are there, that would still work because we look for any number of words and then total, any number of words, and then cases, right? And if you wanted to make it so you could say like total number of cases, remove that, and that will work. You just kind of have to mess with these regex search patterns and think like if what you typed in will match that pattern. Again, like I'm not a pro at this, so I really don't want to butcher like explaining how all of this works. But also what I'm going to do is actually not call this function. I'm just going to leave it like that. So without the curly braces. The reason for that is actually, I just want to define what I would call. I don't want to actually call it, and you can write this. There's nothing wrong with what I've written so far. So I'm not going to call it until we actually see that this pattern is matched. And that'll save us a little bit of like computing time and stuff too. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm just going to copy in the other patterns that I have just to save us a bit of time, and I'll go through how they are and what they work. Okay, so here we go. So we have all these patterns. Now, essentially what this is saying is I've just defined like two patterns for each of them so that I don't have to say anything in between total and cases. I can say something and then total cases. And then what that will do is return to me data.getTotalCases, the same function we had from before. Now I've done the same thing with deaths. It's the exact same except cases have been replaced with deaths. And obviously the function we're going to call now is getTotalDeaths, not getTotalCases. So that's the idea behind these total patterns. So let's now look at how we would actually use this. And of course, why my tab key doesn't seem to be working out either. My keyboard's just falling apart. Okay, so so once we get this text, right, once I say something, we want to loop through all of these patterns and we want to check if the text matches that. So we're going to say for pattern func, right, the function we'll call in this case, total patterns.items. What this will do is loop through and get this pattern, and it will get this function for each of those entries, right? And then what we'll do is we'll say if pattern.match, since we did recompile, this is a regex pattern, so we can call .match on it. If it match is text, then what we'll do is we'll say result equals func, and we'll call it. Now what this is pretty much saying is like the function is defined here, but we haven't called it. So no matter what pattern we match, just call the function associated with it, store that value in result, which we're doing, and then let's break. Now, what we'll do at the bottom is we'll say if result, and then speak result, like that. So we'll just say that number. The reason for this is we're going to check some other patterns. So I just want to make sure that we don't possibly say two answers. So rather than just speaking result here, I'll break the loop, and then we'll check at the bottom if result was defined. And in fact, if we're going to do that, we need to say result equals none to start. So we'll check if it's equal to something. If it is, then what we'll do is we'll speak that result. And that's the idea behind this. And then once that happens, we'll go back up to the top of the while loop and we'll start listening again, and we can ask another phrase. So let's try this. And it would be helpful if we call the function. So let's call it. And in fact, where I define data here, I'm just going to steal this and I'm just going to define it inside the main function like this. And I keep forgetting that my freaking copy and paste doesn't work. So I need to do this. That's that's gonna have to be a fix after this video. So let's throw that in there. Okay, so data's in there. We could take these constants if we wanted to move them down. We don't need to. Run token we don't need right now. But anyways, let's keep going. Okay, so we define data in here now. What I want to do is test this. I will note that there's a few minor mistakes. So the first thing is where this little space is, we need to remove that. Otherwise, we're gonna get some issues. And let's see now if we test this, if this actually works, if this gives us any results. So let's run this. How many total cases?
3,687,688.
Perfect. Okay, so that's working. So let's quit the program there. And so that's finished. Now, the thing that's throwing me off is it automatically breaks out. I'm curious if this break keyword is somehow activating this loop, but I would hope that this would just keep looping. Now, I'm actually going to put some print statements for debugging here. And then just say exit like that. We're going to print out whatever the text is that this person says, just so that we can see it and we can see what the computer interpreted. So let's try this again. Let's try something with deaths. What is the total number of deaths?
255,138.
Okay, great. So text.find end phrase. So apparently, okay, I see why. So this is returning -1 when I do text.find. So I just need to say if this does not equal -1, then we'll exit, because it was automatically exiting before and I was a little bit confused why that was happening. But that's because if it doesn't find the phrase, it returns -1. So we need to make sure it's not -1, and then we'll exit out. Okay, great. So now what should really happen is let's run this again. Let's see, what was our stop word? Stop, okay. How many total cases?
3,687,688.
Stop. And there we go. It exited out. Okay, so there we go. We're getting pretty good now. Now what we want to do is get country-specific information, and then I'm going to show you how we can actually update this. So from like speaking, like we ask update, and how can we do that? Okay, so we have total patterns. Now what we're going to do is say country_patterns. And this one is going to be a little bit different. Might be a little bit more confusing to some of you. So I'm actually just going to copy in these patterns again, and I'll explain how they work. So this one, let's tab these forward. So yes, they're in line with that. And let's have a look. Okay. So this first pattern is any number of words, cases, any number of words. Now this is the idea being that what we're going to do is we're going to look through all the total patterns. And if we don't match any total patterns, then we'll look and match the country patterns. Or actually, we might do it the other way around. No, we'll do it that way. That's fine. But anyway, so like if we have any number of words, cases, then any number of words, then what we'll do is we'll map that to lambda country data.get country data country total cases. Now I know this seems a little bit confusing, but what lambda says is this is an anonymous function that takes one variable country, so as a parameter. And when it takes that, it will call and return this value. So since we've done this, we've actually defined a function here that calls this function and returns the total cases value from that. And then same thing with total deaths. So what we can do is a very similar thing to this, except when we call func, this time we just need to put a country inside of it. So what I'm going to do is copy this for loop, and I'm going to paste this here. Keep forgetting that Control C is not working. So let's copy. Oh, what the heck? Copy and paste. Okay. So now this time for pattern func in not total patterns, but in country patterns dot items, we'll see if the pattern dot matches the text. And if it does match the text, what we'll do is we'll actually check if there's any name of a country in the text. So at the top here, I'm actually going to say country_list is equal to data.get list of countries. And we're actually going to put that into a set of a list like that. So since this is going to return to us, actually, no, that is a list. Set. No, set should be fine. Actually, what am I doing? Why do I need lists like that? Let's just do set. A little brain fart there. So we'll make this a set. And then that way, what I can actually do is in O1 time, it's probably not relevant to many of you, I can check if a country is in that set. And if it is, then we're good to go. So essentially, we say if... that probably won't work, actually, because I need to just look through all of the... Yeah, so actually, this is going to have to stay as a list. And this is going to be annoying to do, but what we're going to have to do is essentially check for every country if that country exists in the text. If it does, then we'll get that specific information. So we'll say for country in what I call this country list, like that. And we'll say if country in text. And in fact, it makes it a little bit faster for us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say text. I'm going to say words equals text dot split at space, and we'll actually put that to a set so that we can check very easily in O1 time if the country's in the text. So we'll say if country in, not text, but in words, then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, result equals the function of country. Now, this again, it might seem a little bit confusing. We're using some more advanced syntax. We'll break that for loop as well. Is we're going to pass the country to this lambda function, and then it will call the get country data with that country. So the idea behind this is we're going to say for pattern function in country patterns.items if pattern.match text. So if we match that text, if it makes sense, like if this is the pattern we're matching, then we'll split the words into a set. The reason for this is we go from a sentence that looks like hello, like let's say how many cases in Canada, we go from that to now a set, right, that has all of the individual words. So that's very easy for us to check if a country is in this set without having to, spend a ton of time computationally doing that. So we do that. We say for country and country list. So for every country, let's loop through. Let's see if the country is in one of those words. So if that country exists in the words, right, then what we'll do is we'll say the result is equal to the function, which was here, at country, which will give us the answer. We'll break this for loop, and then I guess we'll keep looking through patterns, but the chance we're going to match a pattern, cases, and deaths is very slim. So then at that point, we'll come down here and we'll speak the result. Now that is the idea behind this. So with that should do it for the country value. So let's actually have a look here and let's see if this works. How many cases in Canada?
61,165.
Stop. Okay, so that worked. Now, I understand some of you are probably still confused with all the regex stuff. Just look up regex search patterns if you want to see how they work. But again, any number of words, cases, any number of words, maps to lambda country, and then we have this function we're calling in the lambda function. So that's the idea. What I will now show you is how we can actually make a new run and how we can update this data. This is advanced. It involves using a thread. I'll explain briefly how that works. But the idea is that, like, say we run this program like 10 days from now. Well, we want to update, but we don't want to have to go back to the Parsing tool to make a new run. We don't want to change this, right? We want to have it automatically update for us. So to do that is kind of complex. It involves polling an endpoint and updating data, but I'll show you how we can do it. So essentially, we're going to make a new method here. We're going to say this is update underscore data self. Now at the top, we need to import some stuff. So import threading and import time. Both of these are built into Python, so you shouldn't need to install them. And then inside of update data, what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a post request to a URL that makes a new run. Now I need to copy in this post request because it's like, I can't just, I don't have them memorized, so I need to copy them in. But if we look at them, we'll say response equals request.post. Notice this isn't get, this is post. And we're posting to the same URL, except instead of, so if we look here, instead of last ready run data at the end, we're going to post to run, right? So we have https parsub.com/API v2 projects self.project run/run. We have the parameters self.params. And again, self.params is defined up here with the API key for verification. So what that does is it initializes a new run on the Parse Hub servers. So this run takes a few seconds though, right? So we can't just immediately ask for the new data because we don't know when this run is going to be finished. In fact, it changes times based on, you know, how much volume's on the server and stuff like that. So we need to continually pull this this kind of endpoint and see when this is done. We need to keep waiting to see when this is done. Now, there's a few ways that we can do this. We can use something called webhooks, which I'm not going to use because they're kind of complex. But what I want to do is actually set up what's called a new thread. It's going to every 5 seconds check this endpoint here and see if we got any new data. Because what this endpoint does is it returns to us the most recent data that we have, right? That's the last ready run. So what we'll do is we'll keep polling it until this data changes. So until the data we're getting is different than the data we currently already have, then we'll keep polling it. And as soon as we get new data, we'll update our data and we'll, you know, tell the user or whatever we've been updated. So what we'll do here is we'll say old_data equals self.data. We're going to define a function called poll. And then what I'm actually going to do is inside of here, we'll pass for now. And I'm going to say t equals threading dot thread target equals poll. Now what this says is let's make a new thread. Now the way threads work essentially is they're two separate kind of running instances of the program. Now it's really hard to explain threads without going into detail, which I don't really want to do. But the idea is that if we run a thread, this won't interfere with what's happening here, right? Because the idea is inside of this thread, we're going to be constantly asking the server for a response, and that takes some time. And I want to make sure that while that's happening, I can still interact with the program. So if I put this in a thread, then that means this will only kind of take over our voice assistant part when it's actually running, which will be for like a few microseconds. Whereas if I didn't put it in a thread, we would actually have to wait a full minute or until we get the new data before we'd be able to actually have that updated data and interact with the voice assistant again. Hopefully that's a good enough explanation, but to make a new thread in Python 3, you do something equals threading.thread, and then you start the thread like that. So we'll start the thread poll, and I've just defined a function inside of a function here. I don't really need to do this, but since it's only used inside of update data, I'm going to. And just, you know, I know this is weird, but just understand this is fine. You can define a function inside of a function. It's called an inner function, right? So we have poll. Now inside of poll, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sleep immediately for 0.1 seconds. The idea of this is that whenever one of our threads isn't doing something, it'll kind of release itself and let the other one start doing something. So I want to immediately, when I start polling, give kind of access back to the main thread, which is what's running the voice assistant, so that this doesn't take over that thread and doesn't, for like a few seconds, we're lagged. Like that's the idea. So since this sleeps, it's like, okay, this thread's not running anymore. It lets the other thread run, which is the thread that's running the voice assistant. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to say time to sleep equals that. I actually can just say old data inside of here. Oh my gosh, I keep forgetting I need to do this. Copy. How many times did I make a copy and paste error in this video tutorial? Be curious to know. Okay, so old data equals that. And I'm just copying what I have over here to make sure we don't mess up. We'll say while true. So we'll do a while loop, and every 5 seconds, I'm going to ping this URL. So I'm going to ping get data. And actually what I'll do in get data is I'll return data. Now the reason for this is, and we'll have to change this up here. So we'll say data self.data equals self.getData. So rather than just setting the data attribute, we'll return it so that way we don't automatically override the data we have unless we want to. If that makes any sense. You'll see how we're going to use this function down below, but just make sure you modify it so it returns data. And now we have self.data equals self.getData, so it will be equal to whatever was returned from this method. All right, so let's go here, and we're going to say new underscore data equals self.getData. Now we're going to check if this data is equal to the old data. And if it is, then what we're going to do is we're going to wait 5 seconds, and then we're going to ping that again. We're going to do this again. So we're going to say if new data does not equal old data, then what we'll say is self.data equals new data. So we'll update that data, and then we'll break, and we'll print actually data updated. So data updated like that. Now, if it doesn't, then we'll just time.sleep for 5 seconds. And that should actually be all we need to do. So this is essentially saying that we'll make a new thread. This thread will every 5 seconds hit that endpoint and check for new data. If it gets new data, we'll stop running this thread. So we'll break out of this while loop, we'll break out of the thread, and we'll set the current data equal to new data, which means that when we now call again the function, right? And that's the reason why, if you look here, I don't just call the function, I actually put the name of the function. When I call that function, we'll get the updated data. So that's the idea behind this. Now, what we need to do is make a verbal command to update the data. So what I'm going to do is we'll say like update underscore command or something. Now, we could make this a regex pattern, but I'm just going to make this update just to make it really easy. So we'll say update command is update. And then what we'll do is at the bottom here, we'll say if text equals update command, then what we'll have to do is data.update data. And let's just do a little speak here. And let's actually say result equals data is being updated. This may take a moment. Oops, if I could type. Okay, so this may take a moment, exclamation point. All right, so that's pretty much the program. Now I'll show you how that works, but this will again take like 30, 40, maybe even a minute to run. So I'll skip through it if it takes that long, but let's run this. Update.
Data is being updated. This may take a moment.
Okay, so we can see that that's happening. Now what I'm gonna do is just wait, and I'll wait to see when that new print statement comes and says data updated. How many cases did Canada have?
61,165.
Okay, so you can see that it says data updated here. And then I asked how many cases Canada have, and it gave me, I'm hoping, an updated value. I mean, I don't know how quickly the website updates, but the idea behind this is that, you know, tomorrow when I want to use this, I don't need to go manually run it. I can just say update at the beginning, and then I can wait, and it will update, right? So it said data updated, which means our data is updated, and that pretty much means that this tutorial is well over. I'll put a link to this code that we've written in the description in case you guys want to copy this down. These are, you know, my private API keys and stuff. I've just left them blank because, you know, I can't be bothered to really deal with them. I'll delete them after the video goes live. But yeah, that's the idea. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project. This stuff is really cool, and I think you can do a lot cooler stuff than what I've done. But again, the objective was to show you the base, show you what you can do, and then let you guys kind of take it from there. So hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like. Consider becoming a channel member and supporting the channel. I definitely appreciate that. Of course, subscribe if you're not, and I will see you guys in another tutorial video.